Book 6, Book of Kin, Chapter 1, Who Raises Our Children, Part 4. First, think about this. Who will deny that a situation where thought rather than debauchery precedes the birth of a child, the meeting of the sperm and the egg, is more moral and physiologically fulfilling? Second, it is also absolutely indisputable that a pregnant woman should receive a wholesome variety of nourishment and avoid stress. One's own family domain, as Anastasia describes it, is ideal for this. Third, giving birth in a familiar surroundings, in a setting one is accustomed to, will create a much more favorable condition for the birthing mother and, more importantly, for the newborn. This is also an irrefutable fact in both psychology and physiology. Now, are you in agreement with these 3 points so far? Of course I am. You see, they are indeed irrefutable, and not only for scholars. Consequently, we cannot deny the positive influence produced by the union of these 3 positive components into a single whole. As a psychologist, I can conjecture that in such a union, a psychic reaction takes place in space. The whole of space, of the universe, reacts to it, accepting the newborn and establishing an information link with him. Possibly, but where is the significance here of establishing an exact birth date for man? A tremendous significance, a global significance. This is what determines the level at which we perceive the world. If we give opportunity to the emergence of the fetus into the world, that means matter is primary in our worldview. If, on the other hand, we give priority to the moment at which the man and woman's thoughts merge together, then consciousness takes precedence in our worldview. The upshot is that we are dealing with the formation of 2 very different cultures which determine our way of life. In the first instance, matter takes predominance, and in the second, it is spirituality. This conflict has been going on for ages, either openly or below the surface. But now I am beginning to see the absurdity of such a conflict. Anastasia talks about the merging not only of these 2 concepts, but of a third as well, into a single whole. On the basis of her statements, one can postulate not only a theory of the birth of a fully fledged man, but also the possibility of its realization in practice. It comes right down to something that is available to everyone. But why do we not take advantage of the opportunities we have? Why is there chaos in our consciousness, and why does life evaporate into vanity? There's the question. Still, I think, I said, you should use the date and hour where the infant emerges into the world from the mother's womb as one's birth date. Only phrase it more accurately. The moment of emergence into the world. Possibly, quite possibly, but as to the moment of birth itself, I think you'd better ask Anastasia. I shall indeed ask her. I'll be interested to know myself exactly when I was born, and when my son was born. Oh, your son, you came to me for advice, and here I've been rambling about my own... Sorry, I got to talking too much. It's something that's been nagging at me. You see, I hold consultation 3 times a week. People come to me with their problems. They all ask the same kinds of questions. How to raise a child? How do I establish contact with my son or my daughter? And the child might be already 5 or 10 or 15 years old. If I tell someone, well, old chap, it's too late to think about raising them now, that I'm killing his last hope. So my real task is basically one of comforting. Well, my son too will be about 5 years old. Does that mean it's too late for me too? You, Vladimir, are in quite a different situation. Your son has Anastasia watching out for him. It's just as well she prevented you from tossing your child out into the routine of our world. She's raising him in the context of a totally different culture. Does that mean that my son and I are of different cultures, and so we'll never be able to understand each other? Parents and children always represent what seems to be different cultures, different worldviews. Each generation has its own priorities. Granted, the distinction is generally not so sharp as in your case. My advice to you is this. Before attempting to communicate with your son, have a talk with Anastasia about how to approach it. Pay careful attention to what she says. After all, you've been reading a lot and thinking a lot about the raising of children. Now it'll be easier for you to understand her. Understanding her doesn't always work out, I countered, even after a long time goes by. Some of her sayings still provoke doubts in me. They are mystical and not the kind that you can prove. In fact, I've deliberately refrained from publishing a lot of her sayings. A lot of them sound more like fantasy, and Alexander Surovich suddenly banged the palm of his hand down on the table and sharply, and somewhat rudely, interrupted me. You have no right to do that. If your mind won't allow you to make sense of something, at least give others the opportunity. I did not appreciate the psychologist's sharp tone of voice or his message. This wasn't the first time I had heard or read of such accusations directed at me. They would reduce me to some kind of half-wit that says my role is no more than transcribing as accurately as possible everything this Siberian recluse has to say. But in making such statements, these smart Alecs weren't taking the whole picture into account. I decided to put this suddenly aggressive psychologist in his place. Naturally, you count yourself among those others, who are able to understand everything she says. I may not be a psychologist with an academic degree, but there is one simple truth that even I can comprehend. If I were to publish all of her mystical sayings without backup evidence, people would be inclined to treat everything written in these books as a fairy tale. And all of the practical stuff that can be put into practice today would get lost. By not publishing some of her mystical sayings, it's quite possible that I have saved a practical message she has for people. Can you specifically tell me more about what kind of mystical sayings you're talking about? Well, here's a good example. She said that she's taken the best combination of sounds in the universe and hidden them in the text of the book, and they will have a beneficial influence on the readers. Yes, I remember that. I remember it very well. It's written in the first book. It also says that the effect is increased if the reader listens to natural sounds while reading. You remember that, eh? And the fact that these words can be found not only in the text itself, but right at the front of the book, remember? The publishers suggested I put them there to intrigue the readers, and I did. And rightly so. Do you think so? But you know, the particular saying right up front turned a lot of people away from the book. Many saw it as just an advertising gimmick, and said so in the media. I removed it in some of the editions. Many people consider it mystical, or just something made up. Idiots! Don't tell me the mind of society can atrophy to that extent, or has mental laziness switched off any logical thinking on the part of the masses. What does mental laziness have to do with it, if the saying is impossible to prove? Prove? What is there to prove? This saying is nothing if not a psychological test, ingenious in its simplicity and effectiveness. It has the power to identify at a single glance, complete dullards with atrophied mental capacities. If they go ahead and mention this in the media, it'll be as though they're saying, "Look at what utter klutzes we are." A most ingenious test indeed. What's this about a test? The saying in question is simply not provable. Not provable, you say? Well, it's not a matter of proving anything. What Anastasia says here is an axiom. A-X-I-O-M. I don't know what that means. Judge for yourself. The text of any book, and I mean any book, any letter, any oral speech, consists precisely of combinations of sounds. Does that make sense? Do you agree? Yeah, I agree. It's true that the texts of all books are made up of combinations. You see how simple it is? It is the very simplicity that people who are too lazy to think logically have stumbled over. Possibly, but after all, she did say she had found and collected the best combinations from the expanses of the universe, and that they would exercise a beneficial effect on the readers. But there's nothing mystical in that. Judge for yourself. When you read any kind of book, or newspaper, or magazine article, doesn't it have an effect on you? The reading can leave you indifferent, or provoke irritation, or satisfaction, anger, or joy. Well, get it? You agree? Yes? Okay, as for the beneficial effect of Anastasia's texts, it's clearly evident in the reaction of the readers. I'm not talking about published reviews, which are sometimes paid for. The fact of the beneficial influence is confirmed in the creative urges shown by the readers. It is evident in the multitude of poems and songs that your readers have composed. I myself have bought 5 audio cassettes of songs dedicated to Anastasia. They have been written by people who are very simple, or maybe just the opposite. Quite possibly they're not so simple after all. I bought these cassettes and listened to them. What Anastasia said has been confirmed by life itself. After all, the poetry came about under the influence of reading, and you call it mystical? You have no right to censor Anastasia. Okay, that's it. I'm leaving. Thanks for the advice. I had already taken hold of the doorknob and was about to walk out when I heard the doctor say, "Hold on a moment, please, Vladimir. I can see you've taken offense at what I've said. I'm sorry if I sounded a bit sharp. I don't want us to part with bad feelings." Alexander Surovich was standing in the center of the room, a little bit pudgy around the middle, getting along in his ears. He neatly buttoned up his jacket and went on. "You should understand that you have a duty to publish everything she says. Don't worry if not everything she says is clear to you, or to me, or to someone else. Don't worry about that. It's important for them to understand." And who's they? Young women still capable of bearing healthy children. If they get it, that means everything will change. Anyway, look at how little we've talked about your son, and that's the whole reason you came to see me. Of course it is. Well, there's no concrete advice I can really give you. Your situation's too irregular. Maybe you could take some picture books to Siberia for him. History books, for example. You might also try dressing up a little. Maybe this sounds silly, but I just want to make sure you don't paint too harsh a picture of our reality for him. What picture would you like me to paint? All prettied up and glossed over? That's not what I'm talking about. Remember, you'll be introducing yourself to your son as a representative of our reality, and this may mean that you'll be compromising yourself in his eyes. And why should I alone be expected to answer for all of the perversions of our society? If you show your son that you are incapable of changing anything in our society for the better, you'll simply be demonstrating how powerless you are. You'll be compromising yourself in your son's eyes. I have a feeling he has been raised in such a way that he will not understand how anything impossible can exist for man. I guess you're right, Alexander Surovich. Thank you for the practical advice. Really, it's not a bad idea to put a good face on our life as far as the child is concerned. Yes, it's definitely worth it, or else he'll think we shook hands and, as far as I could tell, parted as friends.